Hello again. Here we are to talk about the Cold War. We are going to continue with the different events of the Cold War. One of the most important events in which maybe we can say actual fighting in Europe existed or was at the point of existing between the Allied troops and the Soviet Union was the Berlin Airlift. What happened? If you remember, in 1945, Germany and Berlin was divided into four zones, each one for Soviet Union, Great Britain, the United States of America, and France. So there were two positions. Remember that in the Treaty of Versailles after World War I there were three positions. Now there were two positions. The positions held by the Allied, that is to say France, Great Britain, and the United States, and the position held by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, with Stalin, wanted to destroy Germany. They wanted a weak Germany, so the Soviet Union wouldn't have to worry about war, about the reaction, or about any attack from Germany. And also because in that way they would be able to keep on adding more and more countries under the communist system. On the other way around, the Americans, the British, and the French wanted a strong Germany to oppose communism and not to allow communism to be spread in Eastern Europe. So, but all the same, they divided Germany, and there was an incident in 1947. The incident was that a new currency. The Allied wanted to impose a new currency for the whole Germany, no matter which zone they were talking about. So the Soviet Union said, no, we are not going to accept a new currency. The Allied ignored that rejection and introduced the new currency, which was the Deutsche Mark. The Deutsche Mark was introduced in the Western zone, but it was not introduced in West Berlin. Why? So as not to antagonize with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't care about this situation, and they decided to introduce a new currency also in East Berlin. So when the new currency by the Soviets was introduced in East Berlin, the Allied introduced the Deutsche Mark also in Berlin. And this made the Soviet Union and Stalin very, very angry, furious, and they blocked West Berlin. Yeah, Berlin was blocked, and that was one of the highest points of the Cold War. We say that West Berlin was surrounded by Soviet troops. The city was cut off, and it was also short of power, gas, coal, and electric supplies from East Berlin because they were stopped. 2 million people lived in West Berlin, and unless the Western powers helped them, they would starve within weeks. But what could the West do? What could they do? Well, they couldn't penetrate through land because West Berlin was blocked. So they decided to use the air corridors, planes, because they hadn't been closed yet. The problem was that the Soviet Union could try to shoot them down. But the United States thought that at that time, as they were the only ones who had atomic bombs, they were sure that Stalin and the Soviet Union were not going to dare to shoot planes down. So they started the Berlin Airlift, which has a code name as an operation. This code name by the British was Operation Plain Fair. It was the start of the biggest air operation in history. Soon, planes were flying day and night along the air corridors. It was very dangerous because there were different problems with the Soviet pilots as well. Eventually, they were landing at 90-second intervals, and each was given an exact time. The pilots, as I told you, had a dangerous job because Soviet planes flew across the air corridors, but Stalin always stopped short of closing the air corridors because he did not want to risk a war. By September, the planes were flying 4,600 tons of supplies, but that was enough. Meanwhile, there was like a competition between capitalists in Western zone and communists in the Eastern zone, because Stalin wanted to show the West, the people in West Berlin, that they lived better. He offered fresh vegetables, meat, and larger portions. And well, there were some West Berliners who moved to East Berlin, but the invitation, was not taken by the majority of the West Berliners. And the people who lived in West Berlin, specifically the Allied government, wanted to show the East Berliners that they lived better. Finally, the USSR ended its blockade of West Berlin at midnight of May the 12th, 1949. That evening, West Berliners put on evening dress and danced in the streets because the blockade had finished and they could start living as they used to live before. But there were some important consequences of this Berlin Airlift. One of the most important was the division of Germany in two different countries, the incorporation of the NATO organization by the capitalist countries and the Warsaw Pact by the communist countries. As I told you, the division of Germany was the most important result of the Berlin Airlift, because any hope of reunited Germany was now ended. In May 1949, the Western Allies brought their zones together to form the Federal Republic of Germany, known as West Germany. And in October of that year, the Eastern sector became a separate state, calling itself the German Democratic Republic. It was East Germany. So the hope of reuniting Germany after, if you remember, Otto von Bismarck, the unification and now the division again, was over. There were two different Germanys. Another important aspect is related to the international organizations. For example, the NATO and the Warsaw Pact. The NATO was held by, or was motivated by President Truman, who said that it was going to be a protection against the communist countries. In April 1949, 12 Western nations signed a treaty. So the communists and Stalin responded with the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was also an organization which incorporated different countries, as for example the Soviet Union, Albania, Bulgaria, different countries that you can see here in this picture. So that was another consequence of the Berlin Airlift. And finally, one of the most important as well was the race armament, because the Soviet Union and also the United States started to accumulate more and more weapons. Until 1945, the only country that had the atomic bomb was the United States, but then the Soviet Union tried and experimented and invented even a more powerful bomb than the one that the United States had with the hydrogen bomb, and then the United States upgraded their bomb, so it was accumulation of war, of arms and weapons, and they threatened day after day to wipe them out. So the United States had different bases in Turkey, for example, and Italy, and they were able to wipe the Soviet Union out with those weapons. And the same happened with the Soviet Union, and it was even worse with the Cuban Missile Crisis that I will explain in the next class. See you. Bye-bye.